It is Friday, September the 14th, and we are here. We are back, episode 2 of the Cine-Men movie podcast. Johnny Real here with you, as alongside with
Edward Silverscreen right here. How y'all doing tonight? Alright, so we are jumping into a different movie this week. Right here we are going over 1980 Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
And as far as last week goes, I hope everybody enjoyed Psycho episode, our first episode. Couldn't have went any smoother for me. I know it was a little ran a little longer than what we had planned, but I think we got into a lot of detail as far as movie news, the way the movie goes, hopefully some backside information on the movie.
Oh yeah, I think we got a nice little steamy baked potato with the beef right there. I really do. Nice little sirloin steak for y'all. Alright, so basically we're going to go ahead and do the same kind of deal. We're just going to jump in and say, hey, this is what, we're looking forward to, what's coming out, that we're looking forward to, maybe even some news you didn't know, and then maybe even a top 5 for y'all. A little different one this time, though.
So don't forget, though, the only way you can find us is Facebook search Movie Reels 405, like, subscribe, share, hit that learn button. It'll take you right to our YouTube link, and subscribe, and that's how you can catch our shows. That's how you can catch our pictures. The Facebook Cine-Men movie podcast on Facebook. We are growing fast, we are growing rapid, and let's get into some little interesting news facts going down. We're doing The Shining, but we're doing the 1980 Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining. And even though this is not Jack Nicholson's one of his best performances, it is definitely one of his most iconic performances.
Oh yeah, very memorable.
As Jack Torrance. This definitely is something that Stephen King did not like.
And it's a little unfortunate on that. I mean, honestly, even just why he didn't like it for that matter, because I thought it was a pretty good movie. Although, I mean, if they made some of the changes, I'd be a little bit upset. Part of the biggest reason, honestly, and which I thought a little weird, was how misogynistic they actually thought Shelley Duvall's character was. Which, I mean, I guess I can get, because they did make her kind of, the weak damsel in distress, can't really do anything or fend for herself kind of deal, which was a little downsizing her, I think. But
yeah, he definitely liked the way he didn't like the way she portrayed herself as the character. We'll get into a little bit more of that later on. But sorry if I sound a little different this week. I'm a little under the weather, coughing, sneezing, sniffly, just right before winter time, I guess.
Oh yeah, all those changes. So like I said, that top 5. All right, so let's hear yours first. What do you do?
So we are doing a different top 5 this week compared to last week. Last week we did our top 5 horror movies as far as getting into the horror season. We just went out. We did top 5. Mine ended with Halloween as my number 1. This week we had a little bit of a debate. We couldn't really decide on what to do as far as top 5. So with what kind of movie we're getting into this week, I'm going to do my top 5 Jack Nicholson performances. Ed, what are you doing in your top 5?
I'm doing my top 5 Stephen King adapted movies, for that matter, that I like. So basically, just trying to throw that in there. I've got some honorable mentions, because I picked the ones I like the most, and then a couple honorable mentions that I thought, were very, very good, but just weren't all as much as the other 5 I've got.
Sounds good. What do we got for us?
All right, so the top 5 I've got, and this is the 2017 version. I still love the 1990 miniseries version, but the 2017 is my favorite. I cannot wait for the 2019 September release of It Chapter 2. So yeah, It. Loved that, literally. And the second one I've got to say for myself has to be Pet Cemetery. Very creepy, just, oh man. I think that's a pretty good movie, personally. After that is a little bit not really truly known. Secret Window with Johnny Depp. I thought, oh man, when my dad got that and I watched it for the first time when I was a kid, that was a little mesmerizing for me.
It's a good movie.
One that's kind of a classic, Children of the Corn. Okay, don't get me wrong, a whole little basic village kind of religious group of kids that just murder you if you're an outsider. Oh man, puts a new spin on Amish. Then the last one of the top 5, of course, is The Mist. You know, I mean, I can't really think of fog without, you know, just the fog.
The Mist is that kind of movie that will straight up kick you in the balls at the end of the movie.
Yes, oh my gosh.
Not to mention...
No, don't want to spoil it too much, so if you want, just go out there and watch it. I promise you'll either shed a tear or just, like, your heart will drop something.
And if you're a Walking Dead fan out there, it's pretty fun to find all the characters from season 1 of The Walking Dead in that movie.
There you go.
So
the honorable mentions I was talking about, of course, Carrie. I mean, Stephen King, Carrie. Come on now. Shawshank Redemption, another great movie. The Green Mile, of course. Can't go wrong with Green Mile. And then Misery. Misery's just kind of like, honestly, I'm going to kind of compare it to this one. A little too real. It could truly happen. I mean, Children of the Corn, yes, maybe, but not really. Secret Window, somewhat stalker type of movie, I guess you could say. But, but yeah, Misery could truly actually happen. So that is my top 5 with a few honorable mentions there.
It's a good top 5. I couldn't put the Stephen King into a top 5. That's just I enjoy all his movies. And then Stanley Kubrick I couldn't do as well, so I think I went ahead and I did my top 5 Jack Nicholson performances. At number 5, I have Chinatown. Who doesn't love mobster movies? Number 4, I have The Shining, which we're covering today. Jack is just too creepy and is all over the place during The Shining. Number 3, I have Batman. Anything Batman I have is in my top 5.
Yeah, no.
Jack Nicholson to me is one of the better Jokers.
Certainly was a memorable performance for that matter.
Number 2 I have coming in is The Departed.
Oh.
Back going to a mobster. He is just a big, mean, old, ruthless fucking mob guy. And
not only that, you've got DiCaprio, you've got Wahlberg, you've got Damon in there. All 4 of those actors. It was just such a, is it this way, that way, left, right, up, down kind of movie. It was amazing. So going on.
And if anybody who knows me, The Departed, to me, is everybody's always asking what my favorite top movie is, and if I had to choose one A and one B, one of those is definitely The Departed. That's how high it is on my list. And number 1, my favorite Jack Nicholson performance of all time is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That is the greatest movie that I've ever seen Jack Nicholson in. He is crazy, he is kind, and not to mention the cast is unbelievable. It stars Danny DeVito.
Okay, that's a pretty big one.
You have Jack Nicholson, Christopher Lloyd, and Brad Dourif. So,
sounds like a solid cast to me.
So, if you haven't seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I definitely recommend it. So that's our top 5 this week, and as we getting ready to get into horror season, our Facebook is growing. Facebook search us at Movie Reels 405. In the next coming weeks, we will definitely have a poll for you guys So we won't be picking the movies anymore of what we cover. It'll all be decided up to you. As the more we get going, the more popular we go. But like I said, today we are covering The Shining, and as we get ready to cover that long form, we are getting ready to get into the big box office season here right before Christmas, and some of the top movies that we're looking forward to seeing in the big screen this next few weeks is The Nun.
Man,
by the time you guys listen to this, The Nun will already be out, and that is from the Conjuring universe. What are you looking forward to about The Nun?
I mean, honestly, the one thing is I hope they do it justice. Because if they don't do it justice for me, basically, I mean, I want that movie, I want to walk out with, not to be disgusting, but soiled underpants. I mean, that movie is going, the trailer is just fantastic. And on top of that, even going back into the Conjuring movies themselves, that actually puts The Nun in a huge kind of world to, and a big reputation to live up to. And it's going to be kind of fun to see where her origins, hopefully, at least, lie. At least owing that to the poster, for that matter, showing, you know, the half alive and half dead aspect of her. Another one I'm looking forward to, actually, and I know this is more of a Christmas movie and kind of more animated, but The Grinch. I mean, I'm thinking that one might be pretty funny, might be pretty good.
Benedict Cumberbatch. I did see the previews for The Grinch, and that's definitely one I'm going to be checking out. Love The Grinch, love Christmas movies.
Oh yeah.
So also coming out in a few weeks. By the time you listen to this, it'll already be out. The Predator.
Yes.
I recently was able to check out all of the first 3 Predators on 4K, on the 4K release. Picked it up at Best Buy. A little Best Buy plug right there. If you're out there, Best Buy, listen. I buy a lot of movies from you guys. A lot of movies. But, no, rewatching those definitely got me hyped up for The Predator, and I can't wait. I could have sworn in the trailer I saw like a 15-foot high predator.
Yes, they apparently are calling it the ultimate predator, which kind of makes sense because, I mean, honestly, if that, you know, like probably what, 6'4" predator for that matter, is doing that much damage to supposedly trained military individuals, I wonder how. Oh man, it
sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Predator fucked and had a love child, and out came the ultimate predator.
Well, if it's got the muscles of Arnold, I guess so then, huh?
And then for going back to something a little bit more child friendly is Goosebumps 2.
Okay, exactly. And if you are a kid that grew up like we did, I grew up on the Goosebumps books.
I grew up on the Goosebumps TV series. I didn't read any of the books. I don't read books. I'm fucking retarded. But I bought the first Goosebumps movie, like I do all my movies, obviously. And I actually enjoyed that first movie. I thought I was going to hate it, but I really enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah. Jack Black actually did, you know, I didn't know what to truly expect with him being the, you know, R.L. Stine of this universe. I've got to admit, I liked it. I really did. I'm a fan. I'm waiting, you know, for number 2 to come out. I did think the only gripe I've got is that it did seem a little Disney-ish, like kind of like the Disney kids movies, I guess you'd say. But I mean, then again, if you go back to like Hocus Pocus and I mean even Brink, you know, for that matter, I mean those were great movies to me back in those days.
Yeah,
so, don't mind that at all.
Well, as we are approaching the 15-minute mark on this first episode here, it is all movies here, and as I said, we pay for our movies here, so I'm just wanting to give a shout out to Vudu. If anybody hasn't yet, you remember on my last episode I said go out, download the Vudu app. All those movies are free.
Which, I mean, okay, it's kind of like, take this for example. It's kind of like YouTube, you know. You watch a video that's a lengthy video, kind of like what these are, and then, you know, you might watch a couple ads. On there, I actually downloaded it too. So on there, you watch maybe a 30-second ad, and then you've got a full movie from there. So definitely that is
and they're
one
free
to go
movies.
out.
All you have to do is plug your internet in. You have to put in your email address, and you're hooked up. You're good to go. You don't have to pay a monthly, $12 to $15 fee. Yeah, go from there. Even TV shows, for that matter, not just movies. Exactly. Even the movie we're covering today, The Shining, is on Prime Video. You can rent it for $2.99, and you can buy it in HD for $7.99.
Either way, not bad at all.
So, and if you want to buy the hard copy on Amazon, it's $9.96.
Which one more movie I actually wanted to that I wanted to come and push out there, Bohemian Rhapsody. If you're a fan of Queen at all, that one's a must see. Even if you just have, I like that song, or I like a couple of their songs, like, go and see that. I know a couple of my friends out there are extremely big fans of Queen, and I know they are dying to see this thing come out.
Well, yeah. Not to mention, we're gonna, when we do dig into The Shining here in just a few minutes, we will cover the 1997 made-for-TV series. We'll go over just a little notes and plug-ins, because we did not watch The Shining 4-hour miniseries, but I'm definitely called about it. We're going to get into it. Mm-hmm. But let's take a few short second break here, and we'll get right back with you right here on the Cine-Men Movie Podcast. And we are back here on the Cine-Men Movie Podcast. A little bit of movie news for you. Yahoo Movie Entertainment ranked their top Jack Ryan actors.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know if you've seen any of the Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan movies.
I have not actually seen them, no.
I don't know if anybody cares, but I thought it was kind of interesting that they did rank them 5-1. Number 5 being Chris Pine. Number 4 being John Krasinski. That's that guy from The Quiet Place.
John Krasinski. Yeah, he actually, if you don't recognize that name, he is off of The Office as Jim. He is off of A Quiet Place as the dad and director and producer of that thing. And he's actually coming into a few different movies.
Well, the new Jack Ryan that they're doing with him in it is a TV series, but it's getting pretty good praise. Number 3, they put Harrison Ford up there.
Oh, there you go.
Number 2, Ben Affleck, and number 1 with Alec Baldwin.
Ooh.
So those are your top 5 rankings of Jack Ryan, Tom Clancy's, put out by Yahoo. So if you guys have a problem with that, don't send no hate mail to me. That is all Yahoo. Also, in other news, Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah, Black Panther.
He wants Black Panther to win an Oscar.
Right, I mean, everybody does.
He is
more than likely going.
He is pushing for that movie come Oscar season, which we're only a few months away from Oscar season, and we will definitely review and have a whole month filled with Oscar movies. Last year's Oscar nominees. We'll start that probably right around Christmas time. And then Top Gun Maverick is pushed back to 2020.
Oh, wow. So, okay. A little bit more of a wait for that. But
so the original crew's coming back. We'll definitely go over the original not too long before we get ready to go watch the new one.
Pretty much, yeah.
And then you were talking about A Quiet Place. They did release that A Quiet Place 2 will be out May 20th,
Definitely
2020.
to that.
2020. So it's going to be interesting. Are they going to do a prequel or just a direct sequel?
Or honestly, even just tell, the origins of where the happenings or the subject came from or took place, for that matter. Because that's one thing I wondered. I know it was in news clippings and all that. That was in the background, and very, very little was told. But Krasinski, come on, man. Release what in the world happened. Why? What happened with this? Like, what happened with that?
What do you think happened? I mean, that's a movie we're going to cover here pretty soon. As far as, do you think those things were what do they refer to them as in the movie?
Pretty much they're aliens. I mean, honestly, it's kind of like an Independence Day thing, to where alien race comes to us and pretty much, I don't know if it dropped off like soldiers, dropped off prisoners, or what, but it dropped off a lot. And I don't know if they've like dug in for years now, or if it's just been that way for maybe a year or two. But yeah, they're aliens coming, and pretty much they're going after anything and everything that literally makes a sound. So be careful if you're talking, if you sneeze, cough, whatever it is, you would be pretty much hit by a 600-pound linebacker going at 35, 40 miles an hour. Seriously, no joke. They are hard, fast, strong animals or creatures.
Well, let's get into what brought us here to the dance is The Shining. And what's interesting about this movie is it debuted in 1980, based off of the Stephen King novel, directed by Stanley Kubrick, stars Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance, Shelley Duvall as Wendy Torrance, Danny Lloyd as Danny, and other than that, it's really a who's who of writers. I heard that they did use some of Stephen King's input in the movie. Other than that, Stanley Kubrick did the screenplay. Diane Johnson did the screenplay. From what I hear, Stephen King and Stanley Kubrick did not simply get along.
Oh yeah, I've heard a lot of that. It's kind of a shame, to be fully honest, on that. But I mean, creative differences, simple as that. That's all you got to really put that on. But one of the small actual points that I heard of that I thought was the weirdest thing ever is the room number. Because in the movie, you know, you're going by and they keep talking about room 237 or 237. And apparently in the book, it's 217.
So we're not going to skip over anything, but you bring up the room number. What happened in the room number? What is...
Honestly, it is a very petty, small little thing. Okay, the hotel that they filmed at, basically, didn't want people to become afraid of room 217. So what they did is just change it to 237 because they simply didn't have a room 237. Which, honestly, I think maybe even that room 217 scare-a-thon or whatever you would have brought customers in. Simply just because we want to stay in the, you know, Stanley Kubrick The Shining room and, you know, get scared or see if anything happens or whatever. I mean, honestly, like, that would have been cool.
So did they film on location? Where exactly? What was the name of the hotel that they filmed at?
I know it was called the Overlook in the movie.
Anyway, the Shining is a family heads to an isolated hotel for the winter, where an evil spiritual presence influences the father into violence while his psychic son sees the horrific forbiddings from the past and the future. Now, we're going to touch on that in just a little bit, but we'll go right back to the hotel.
Alright, so the actual hotel, the outside, and what they basically filmed upon was the Timberline Lodge Hotel. And it's actually kind of funny because the Timberline Lodge is in Mount Hood in the area of northern Oregon. So, you know, literally they're supposed to be in Colorado, but they're in Oregon, like, what, probably 1,200, 1,300 miles away easily. And, you know, I thought that was actually, like I was actually saying about the film, I thought it was really, really awesome that they, you know, were pretty much in a helicopter or a plane or something like that, flying over the mountain range to get the shots of, you know, them driving the car and going from there. I really thought that was pretty cool, but you know, to get the realism, the real feel of that they were going somewhere, or he was going somewhere for that matter.
So the movie starts off with a beautiful scenery helicopter over the top, the shots, and it looks amazing. So interesting enough, I didn't know this, but Stanley Kubrick is an official pilot. So the way the Shining opens is
possibly him flying the actual helicopter or whatever apparatus they used. It's pretty cool.
But interesting enough, Stephen King actually got the title for his novel from a John Lennon song.
Oh, okay. That's actually pretty cool. A little cool fact right there.
He hated the movie, though. I can't see. And so, some of the small details about him hating the movie is really about the way Stanley Kubrick portrayed Wendy Torrance in the movie.
Shelley Duvall's character.
Yes.
So, I mean, honestly, maybe he was wanting her to be a stronger character, a stronger person, I guess you could say, for that matter. Because she did seem, like I said, the damsel in distress in the movie. She did seem to kind of have that, I don't know, even if I have a weapon, what to do with it kind of deal. Which was a little bit shocking to me, but that's just how they played it out. Simple as that. I can't really stop it.
And I've also seen that he stated that he really dislikes the movie also. Stanley Kubrick pretty much just took his novel and changed it too much. But something I got to get into is, like, did he not read the screenplay or the script before Stephen King was like, okay, yeah, you can make a movie off of it?
I mean, possibly not, because literally he could have just been, coming up from, or possibly not. He could have just, the actual studio came up to him and said, hey, Stanley Kubrick wants to write a movie going from, your book Shining, and yeah, so he sold the rights, or sold some of the rights or whatever, and said, okay, whatever, cool, kind of deal.
So the way the movie starts off is Jack Torrance is a writer, and he is pretty much going to be staying at this hotel from the end of October until the beginning of May. The entire winter, he'll be here at this hotel. Now, I have seen this movie numerous times. I love this movie. It is one of the creepier Stephen King novels turned into a movie. Whether he liked it or not, I enjoyed it. This is your first time seeing the movie. What did you?
Yeah, it is.
What are your thoughts?
I thought it was a good movie. I liked it. Some of it is kind of like where I figured it would go to. If you look in the maze, I kind of figured something would get lost in there somehow. That would come into play. I figured that just the whole entire house was going to be kind of a playhouse in a way. I didn't see some of it coming like some of the other characters, the twins, and different things like the butler, different things like that. But yeah, I definitely would give it at least 8.5 out of 10. Seriously, 8.5 out of 10.
So the tragedy that they talk of in the movie was from 10 years prior in 1970, where this guy who killed his entire family, and supposedly they just called it cabin fever. Sounds a lot like the Amityville Horror.
True. I mean, you spend way too much, because like you said, they're in the dead winter. They're supposed to be in what is Colorado and basically the Rockies. And honestly, with that, you've got to figure those guys, those ones get tons of snow. And I mean, we have bad winters sometimes here in Oklahoma, but those people get tons of snow, literally to where cars are not able to go in or out at all. And you might kind of lose your mind, even in a big hotel, being stuck with the same two people for 5 months. He thought, oh, this is, when it opened up, he thought, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake for me. It's going to be great, possibly, bunch of quiet time and solace and peace and all that for me, but it didn't turn out that way. One other thing that I wanted to mention, in a lot of Stephen King novels, the main protagonist is a writer or a journalist of some sorts.
Now, in most of the Stephen King movies, kind of give us a little feedback. Who in these movies are writers?
Basically, the main person that it's talked about, Bill Denborough. Right here, you've got Jack Torrance in The Shining. So, I mean, those are just two examples for that matter. So, the main character in the book is kind of modeled after himself. But yeah, starting with the main character. Okay, so the movie starts out, he goes to an interview. So, goes to an interview, and he's talking to the owner of the hotel and one of the directors of the hotel. And he's talking about being the caretaker for the 5 months and how he'll get peace and solitude for writing his books. And one thing that kind of stuck out to me is that they didn't tell him about this when in Denver, when he was supposed to be, being told about the job.
Over the phone.
Yeah, over the phone. But they told him in person at the main office in the hotel about a tragedy that actually happened back in 1970 with a man named Charles Grady and his entire family. And it's kind of a bird's eye look into what's going to come up into the film, actually, which is honestly, I think, a little bit funny that you're pretty much throwing out what the film's going to be about within the first probably 7 minutes, if that. And what they go on about is that there was actually a murder in the hotel around 1970. And with that murder, he basically had cabin fever, what you were talking about earlier for that matter, and kills his entire family. Literally, wife, kids, all that. He just splits open their heads with an axe, goes from there, and all in all, he blows his own brains out with a double-barrel shotgun. Just, and they kind of just, like, oh, well, do you still want to do this because this happened here and da-da-da? And he's like, oh, yeah, that's not going to happen to me. No way. And
something that I find interesting is he's an aspiring writer and a recovering alcoholic who has had aggressive incidents in the past.
Yeah, with his son when he... what we mean by that is the little boy Danny, about, I think they said 5 months prior to the beginning of the movie.
And what's funny is when you're first introduced to Danny Torrance, the actor is Danny Lloyd, Danny possesses the Shining, a psychic ability that includes him seeing the hotel's horrific past. And he pretty much already knows what is going to happen and what his future lies within the first few minutes. And his alter ego, as you would say, or his imaginary friend Tony, is pretty creepy.
Yeah, they introduce you to a little side character, you could say, named Tony. And to me, Tony is kind of like a partial possession of this kid, because the kid says that Tony is a little boy that lives in his mouth. And you can literally, he's brushing his teeth, for example, in the start of the movie. And he's talking to Tony about, why don't you want to go to the hotel? Why don't you want to go to the hotel? And he's demanding, no, you're going to tell me why you don't want to go to the hotel. I want to know. And then the kid blacks out. And a kind of slightly disturbing scene comes on about the hotel elevators, which, keep in mind, this kid has no idea. This is internet era, so the kid has no idea what this hotel looks like. But it goes in, and there is blood just pretty much in a tidal wave coming out of the actual elevator.
And what's interesting about that, and pretty funny, is that in the day 1980, 1979, when the trailer was first released, you couldn't have something that gory in a trailer that's not rated. So Stanley Kubrick lied and said that that was just a bunch of rusted water in the trailer because of the old hotel. And in the movie, when you go see the movie, you'll find out that it's just blood.
Which, I mean, don't get me wrong. To me, I would have been one of those people that do the ratings and kind of looking at them like, do you think I'm stupid, or are you really trying to do this right now? Like, to me, he had to buy someone off, because there's no way in my imagination that would be rusted or rusty water, for that matter.
Now, we're not going to break this movie down scene by scene like we did last week with Psycho. It's just too long of a movie.
Yes.
It's a classic movie. It's a great movie. And we'll touch up on some interesting nitbits and some of our favorite scenes here and there. But it's widely one of the greatest American horror films ever made. Martin Scorsese didn't direct it, but Martin Scorsese ranked it one of the 11 scariest horror movies of all times.
That's a big foot right there. That's a big shoe to fill. But yeah, so...
And then you find it interesting, the budget for this movie is $19 million.
Okay, so not too bad.
We're going to touch some bases. Last week when we talked about Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's budget was...
$800,000
in 1960.
So not even a dime of what this is.
20 years later, 1980... the budget is $19 million, and at the box office, it made $44.4 million at the box office.
Which, okay, I want to touch on that for a minute, because you say 19 to 44. Okay, 19 million budget, 44 million made. With Psycho, you have, and this is still in that area, $800,000 budget, but $50 million made. That's pretty crazy, I mean, honestly. You know. So going into some of the movie, the starting scenes, this is, Charles Grady is noted as the one who did the murders in 1970. They said he had cabin fever. Funny enough is that they start, I think it was on a Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. And pretty much they go in and they've got Wendy, Shelley Duvall, Jack Nicholson, Jack Torrance, and then they've got Danny Torrance, or Danny Lloyd for that matter. So they're all viewing and all that, and they're being taken on a tour of this actual location, which, funny enough, there's a bit of info that I've heard that it was 85 takes to get that tour correct. 85 takes just for a tour. But a cook named Holland takes them around. Black guy, bald, seemed like very, very nice guy. Takes them around the kitchen, shows Shelley or Wendy, as they are in the movie, shows her around the kitchen, so she knows where to prepare the meals and where to, show them to get something to eat. Shows them the freezer and how much meat, and I mean, they've got piles of meat, piles, literally. And then shows them the storage room, the dry storage, where you've got your beans and rice and peas and blah, blah, blah. Well, they go on, and there's a point where they take Wendy and Jack and take them off to view another part of the hotel, and they leave Danny with Holland. What I find interesting about this scene, and why I'm bringing it up, is because Holland apparently has the shine, or the shining, as well. And what they mean by the shine is that it's a power, an ability, if you will. And what's funny about it is it reminds me of telepathy. Holland says that he can read his mind, basically. Like, he calls Danny Doc, and then Wendy says, "Oh, how did you know we've called him Doc? We've called him Doc for years." And he goes, "Oh, I must have heard it, heard you calling him Doc." And he goes, "I must have heard you calling him Doc earlier." And she's like, "Well, okay, I guess maybe I did say that." And it goes on, and he talks about how his grandmother could do it and how he can do it. and how he knows Danny can do it. And Danny goes to tell him that he's not supposed to talk about it. And he's like, have your parents told you not to talk about it? And he says, no, Tony has told me not to talk about it. And he's like, well, who's Tony? He said, well, Tony's my friend. He he's my friend. And he's like, okay, well, what's special about Tony? Why does Tony get to boss you around? And he's like, well, Tony lives inside of my mouth. And he's like, he's like, okay, can I see him? And he's like, well, sometimes he lives inside my stomach. Gets kind of weird, and I'm thinking, definite possession with this kid and Tony. Well, he imagines basically Tony as the index finger on his right hand. And anytime he's talking to Tony and Tony talks to him, or Tony talks to the mother, he kind of makes his voice raspy and basically will kind of do a puppet-like motion with his right index finger, meaning that's Tony. So basically, and that's kind of a key point to this entire movie, is that the shine, or the shining for that matter, that you are shining upon someone else when you read their mind, or like you said earlier, you can actually see into the future of possible events that are going to happen, or see into the past, possible events that have already happened, which makes you think that a lot of this happens in this movie, because there's a lot of points of that in this entire movie,
and
for the whole family.
Right. What's interesting about it, though, is that this movie is still to this day very creepy, very eerie. The soundtrack is a huge influence to that. The little twin girls is creepy. The scene where Jack Nicholson goes to room 237 and sees this beautiful woman get out of the tub, dripping wet, she's nude, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's like a old decrepit body. And we're going to go ahead and jump ahead of ourselves here, but we're not going to break this film down scene by scene. You guys have seen it. If you haven't seen it, I widely recommend going and seeing it.
Most definitely.
Don't compare it to the book. Don't compare it to the 1997 miniseries. This movie is very, very good. Interesting notes about it, though, that the production took place almost exclusively at MIE L Street Studios, when the set's strongly based on real location. So it's it's not very different of Kubrick working with a small crew, as it allows him to take many takes. The axe scene was almost 120 takes. So getting back and touching bases with some of the actors who was going to play Jack Torrance was interesting. I find it pretty interesting that some of the Kubrick's first choice of the role, Jack Nicholson was always Kubrick's first choice for the role. He fell in love with the way he just did the audition. He enjoyed Jack's audition. He enjoyed his tapes. He was automatically the first choice for that character. Other actors considered included Robert De Niro, who he claims the film gave him nightmares for a month, and then Robin Williams and Harrison Ford, all whom met with Stephen King's disapproval.
Which, honestly, the Robert De Niro, I think, would have played pretty good, but the Robin Williams is a little interesting, to be fully honest, because I couldn't really picture him doing many horror movies, if not really any, for that matter. But hey, that's why Jack Nicholson did eventually get the part, 100%.
Another interesting note here, it's pretty interesting fact that The Shining was among the first half dozen films after 1976, Bound for Glory, Marathon Man, and Rocky, to use the newly developed Steadicam, a stabilizing mount for motion picture camera which mechanically separates the operator's movement from the cameras, allowing smoother tracking shots in the operator moving an uneven surface. So this movie was Stanley Kubrick, though, if you look back at most of his movies, he has always one step ahead of everybody else as far as the technology goes.
Trying to innovate. I see that. One interesting fact that I've seen that they pointed out in the movie is that apparently they said the hotel was erected on an Indian burial ground, which, I'm sorry, always spells trouble. It's always a bad thing to do anything on an Indian burial ground because of the spiritual land, for that matter. It's always a bad idea because it's going to bite you in the ass. So apparently they started construction in 1907, and they ended up having the hotel open in 1909. And then, like I said, there was the murders in 1970, and this is about 1980. And like I said, this is about 1980, for that matter, going in. Well, like I said, they were taking tours, talking to the little kid about The Shining, the gifts he's got, kind of a Sixth Sense thing in a bit, if you will. And then, pretty much, Danny starts actually going through the house and getting kind of settled, and he eventually sees the 1970s murders. Which, I mean, I'm sorry, but for a kid, that would be horrible to see. Literally, just horrible to see that. You know, let alone to experience it. Because he's probably, I'd say, like 7, 8 in this, maybe 9 tops. But either way, even at 10, this would be kind of a horrific thing to deal with, basically.
Yeah, and you hear the horror stories from Jack Nicholson and Duvall about how she was constantly exhausted. Nicholson had said he never wants to work with Kubrick again because of how many takes it took for the axe scene. And even though Jack Nicholson used to be a volunteer firefighter and he was moving that axe pretty good, that's the reason why he was moving it pretty good, I still find it interesting that he would come out and say he would never work with that director again. And it's not just Jack Nicholson. There's a lot of actors, writers that say they will never work. Well, they can't work with him again. He's dead. But there's a lot of people back in the day that said they would never work with him again because he was just so out there. And he was as crazy as some of his movies seem to be.
That's actually a really interesting fact for that matter. But yeah, no, yeah, I've also heard that because he did apparently quite a few nutty things. Apparently, going along with the movie, one thing that they talk about is that the little boy Danny was injured by Jack. And Jack tells Wendy that if he ever basically it was in a drunken rage, says he was writing a book prior to this, and basically he got mad because Danny had thrown some of his papers around. And I mean, I can get, you know, being a little angry, but yeah, I mean, you don't, you know, just use full strength yanking the hell out of your kid. But no, with that matter, you know, anger does lead us to do some stupid things at times.
So, and that's one of the other reasons supposedly Stephen King didn't like this movie, was because Kubrick made Jack Torrance out to be a just mean old ruthless drunk who got angry as the film progressed. And if anybody wants to go read the book or watch the 1997 miniseries, Stephen King actually prefers the miniseries over the movie because it's more truth, it's more faithful to his book. So The Shining is definitely a film that stands the test of time, just like Psycho did last week. Everybody everybody needs to go see this movie. Go rent it, go buy it. It might even be on Vudu as far as one of their free films, but there's an interesting fact that this movie is actually going to be in theaters in the upcoming weeks at Harkins Theater.
Yeah, I've actually heard the date's going to be October 23rd,
right.
Tuesday at like like 7 or 7:30 p.m.
Right in time for their for Halloween.
Yeah.
They do that every Tuesday. Is their Tuesday night classics at Harkins Theater. You can get in for $5. $5 gets you a ticket, and you can see all the old time classic movies that you want to on the big screen. I've been to plenty of them. It doesn't matter what movie it is. If it's your favorite movie, you have to go see it on the big screen. We might actually go check it out again that Tuesday night on the big screen.
Yeah, actually talking about when he was writing.
You talking about Stephen King?
Oh, no. Talked about when Jack Torrance is writing the writing scenes. His mood, even in the early days, because I think, it started on a Tuesday, and I'm pretty sure they said it was Saturday, one of the days he started to write. And, getting acclimated and all that to the actual new environment and going from there. His mood changed dramatically.
Yeah, it changes pretty fast in the movie.
I mean, it kind of, you can see he gets a little annoyed here and there, but you can see he kind of backs himself off a lot. But when he's writing, like, he was cussing her out, telling her, when I'm writing, when you hear this typewriter, typing and all that, what do you do or don't when I'm here? You leave me alone and all kinds of different things. And it was just kind of a huge, change that you could already see he was affected by whatever is haunting or taking place in this hotel. Which, this I've found to be kind of a not really in-your-face ghost film, if you will.
It's supposed to be portrayed as a haunted environment, but let's get to the ending. This is going to be one of those it's 2.5 hour movies. The way it is it's the plot is pretty simple. Jack Torrance arrives at the mountain isolated overlook hotel. Everybody knows the plot. He, as time gets on, he gets angry and angry and angry, and so when you get to this movie, what was the one thing that stood out the entire time about this movie, from that very opening scene to the famous ending picture scene? What was your thoughts about from the beginning and then to the end?
Truthfully, like you were just saying, how much his anger, you could even say rage, goes, just skyrockets. Then on top of that, you've got, one thing that stuck out to me was the maze, which was kind of a Stanley Kubrick creation. Stephen King actually uses hedge animals or creatures, if you will, that will kind of come alive when you aren't looking at them. Actually, there's been shout outs to Doctor Who from that, for that matter. But the maze, to me, kind of was pulling in a lot of the film, as in, I knew something from the get-go. Once they gone to the maze and said, oh, people will get lost in there for hours and hours, I was like, something's got to happen with that maze, to me. On top of that, with his anger, and then with the misogynistic way they treated Shelley Duvall, her character, to be the weak woman portrayal, I will say, are three of the things that stood out to me the biggest, for that matter. What stood out for you?
It's a movie that I've seen numerous times, but to me, it's always going to be the bathroom scene. And it's
another bathroom
scene. But I'm still always a little troubling with the ending, because is the hotel haunted? Is it a ghost story? Is Kubrick telling a story with ghosts of the two girls? Are they the ghosts haunting people? The former caretaker and the bartender, are they a ghost that's haunting? You're led to believe that it's just a ghost story and Jack is possessed. But the ending shows you the famous picture frame with the 4th of July party from 1921. So you're led to believe that there's some time
manipulation in the works, for that matter. Exactly. Because, yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just Jack Nicholson. The only difference is he's in basically a suit and, I think a bow tie combination, for that matter. Partying like it's, 1999, except for way back in 21, for that matter.
So, really, in some sequences, there is a question of whether is it Ghost Story, is it Cabin Fever,
reincarnation, even.
That's another thing. But I can definitely see Stephen King's frustration with the movie, because now, before I get into this, I watched the movie, I love the movie, but when you actually learn about the book, Stephen King, and what Stephen King wanted the movie to look like, you can definitely see the frustration of why Stephen King doesn't like it.
Yeah, definitely. Talking about the things that stuck out, one of the things that stuck out was, of course, Danny and Tony, for that matter. Danny, like we've talked about, is the son. Tony is the possession, imaginary friend, possibly the shine or shining ability in him, for that matter. In one scene, or actually in a few different scenes, for that matter, he kind of gets to blurt out the famous line, "Red rum, red rum, red rum, red rum," and the thing, murder, of course, spelled backwards, but it sounded almost like a parrot talking, for that matter, like a trained parrot that's just been taught to say that multiple times.
That's another thing that probably seems frustrating is we're definitely going to review the book, and I think that's going to be the first poll that I'm going to throw up. I'm going to throw up a poll, and I'll definitely this episode is going to drop September 14th on Friday at 3 p.m. So I'll throw up the poll on the same day, and the poll is going to ask simply, what version of this story do you prefer? Do you prefer Stephen King's book? Do you prefer the 1997 miniseries? Or do you prefer the 1980s Stanley Kubrick's movie? So to get the poll out there, and to get the poll to see if you guys follow and actually give a shit about the poll, I'm going to throw up the poll, and this will be the first subject of matter. Because it seems to strike an ordinary balance between the psychological and the supernatural, and which ways lead you to think that the supernatural could even eventually be explained by Jack. He must be imagining all these things. Maybe he's just crazy, and his kid and wife isn't even there.
Right. I mean, or even that, he's kind of living a life over and over and over and over, kind of a Groundhog Day effect.
Exactly. So I think the rest of this show is just going to be us going over the ending.
Fantasy booking.
Yeah, fantasy booking. So, is he a ghost? I mean, me, honestly, I think it's being just over thought about. I think it's what Stanley Kubrick's version of it is pretty much, they go up there and he writes, and he goes wacko, and he tries to kill his family.
What actually was interesting, another kind of famous line or phrase used nowadays is brought up in there again. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And that is written, I mean, probably hundreds, if not thousands of times. I mean, it's literally probably 400 pages of what we assume all has the words and lines constantly. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Constantly. Honestly, one of the things we found out is the poor secretary of Stanley Kubrick had to write that out herself on a typewriter. I feel kind of bad for that lady, but I mean, dedication to the job, you getting paid, well, okay, I'm getting paid to do this, well, fine, whatever. But no, I do think it was kind of a crazy ending, because, okay, the cook, like I said, has the shine as well. Comes back, and because he, just has this huge, horrible feeling, and he tries to get, the Rangers to get in touch with them by radio, where, they try and get in touch with them by phone. Can't do it, because, under feet, not inches, feet of snow, it's going to be extremely hard, even with landlines. On top of which, you've got the cook coming in what's called a snowcat, which for a lot of us southern folks, we don't understand a lot of that. So what a snowcat or a snowcat, I'm sorry. What a snowcat is basically a big snowmobile, like a car snowmobile. So he comes in on that and pretty much is trying to rescue the family, trying to see what's going on, why everything's going like it is, and see, basically how's everything going. And he has a horribly bad feeling. Well, pretty much goes in and he finds out that Jack Nicholson's crazy, or Jack Torrance is crazy. Jack Torrance swings the axe and kills him almost on the spot, which, bye-bye to the cook. Unfortunately, you're not making any more meals. So it goes on, and Shelley Duvall and Danny Lloyd, or Wendy and Danny, are in the maze running from Jack. Well, Jack follows, or Danny is running through the maze from Jack. Well, Jack follows Danny, and he's calling his name out, and, kind of horribly just maniacal glint in his eye, if you will, about pretty much murdering his little boy, which, is every parent's worst nightmare, that your significant other wants to kill their kid. Well, goes on, and eventually he doesn't find the kid. This kid's smart enough to cover up his tracks in the snow, and
they get lost in the maze.
Yes,
that's another interesting fact, that Kubrick just threw the maze in there, and I'm not too sure if I don't think the maze was in the book, but I know King didn't like the maze at all, and Stanley Kubrick would actually laugh at the fact that cast and crew would get lost in the maze, and he would just sit back and
basically laugh about it.
So Kubrick, we keep going over this, but everybody disliked working with him,
which is kind of crazy, because he made pretty good movies actually, but he's creative differences, and maybe he's just one of those directors that just one-time rub is about it, and go from there and bye-bye.
So we hit on some pretty interesting key points of the movie, some interesting facts, some reasons maybe King didn't like it or really just didn't care for it. But we're just going to go over the end a little bit more, and pretty much that would wrap up the Shining episode, because there's too much that everybody knows about it. Like, as far as an in-depth scene-by-scene goes, it's one of those movies that explaining it in long form and dialogue isn't really going to do it justice. You just go out there and, it's worth seeing. It's definitely 2 thumbs up on my list. But at the end of the film, the camera moves slowly towards the wall in the overlook, and a 1921 photograph revealed to include Jack Torrance, seen in the middle of the 1921 party. In an interview with Michael Cine-Men, Kubrick overly declared that the photograph suggests that Jack was a reincarnation of an earlier official at the hotel. Still has not stopped from developing an alternative readings, such as maybe Jack had been absorbed into the Overlook Hotel. And so really it's just, that's what Kubrick right there says is the ending. That's what it's about.
Right.
So you can have your fan theories, you can have your fantasy bookings as you will that we use, but Kubrick just pretty much declared that the photograph suggests he was a reincarnation of an earlier official.
Okay, so kind of cut and dry and hanging up. One thing that I did want to point out with that, and is an earlier scene, is I think the thing that truly set him off was, her interrupting his writing process, and then he was actually falsely accused of hurting Danny. Danny wandered into room 237, got hurt, and he said by a crazy old woman that was in there, and his sweater was all ripped up, marks on his chin and neck, for that matter. And she asked, did you do it? Did you do it? Da, 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 cursed at him, and basically pretty much carried around a baseball bat for the most of the movie that you see her in after that, because she thought he had injured the kid yet again. Well, he then turns to the bar, which is empty, and they actually make a point of stating that, well, if you wanted any booze, you hope you brought your own. And a actual bartender just pops up magically. And funny enough, the name of the bartender is Lloyd. Well, the bartender serves him and all that, and it just kind of, his insanity keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. And the camera goes around them, and you actually see that 1921 party as it's going on. And it doesn't make sense at the time, but up to that picture, then it does. But, she comes in and tells him of a crazy woman in the room 237 that we're not alone. And he's like, how in the hell do you think that? And basically, he goes to check on it and sees the naked woman. She turns into kind of an old woman with horrible, horrible sores on her, for that matter. And he freaks out, and kind of after that, it goes on a killing rampage for quite a while of the movie.
So we went back and forth on the movie. We've gotten into some detail about the ending. We've gotten into some detail about the boy, and whether it's a ghost story or if it's not a ghost story. But one interesting fact that everybody was pretty interested in, and one of the main reasons this movie is so wildly popular, is the famous scene where he uses the axe, cuts into the door, and he simply says, "Here's Johnny." And that, believe it or not, was complete 100% improv by Jack Nicholson.
Which is kind of cool, honestly, because there has been a ton of different movies and different lines and different scenes that have just been improv by the actors themselves, just throwing something out there funny or something out there creepy. Because this one, of course it's from the late night show, but that "here's Johnny" kind of deal is just creepy in the mannerism of which he used it. And poor Shelley Duvall apparently was actually truly scared of him throughout most of the set, which is very, very telling of how she kind of had to get into the character and how he got into the character, for that matter.
Yeah, she was pretty abused, if you can say, as far as by the director. He would, you guys can go back and try to throw it in the Google machine and search it up. She was pretty, I wouldn't say abused, but she was tortured pretty much by Stanley Kubrick, as far as so many retakes and leaving her out in the cold, and would just do some things to frighten her with Jack Nicholson. And like you said earlier, she was pretty
terrified of the guy. Yeah. But she actually at one point in the movie even locks him away in the storage to get away, basically. Which, truthfully, okay, touching on the end when they did actually get away. Okay, the ending is basically that she gets in the snow cap and basically starts the engine and leaves, while Jack Nicholson is left in the maze, pretty much just like a wild animal, hollering and screaming, and it's not even really discernible words, for that matter. But he goes on and goes on and goes on and is lost in this maze. Well, the thing is, it's messed up that he just literally freezes to death, because one of the last shots before they go on to the photo is that of him sitting there pretty much a popsicle stick because of the low temperatures, probably the winds, the freezing snow on the ground. And I mean, he had a jacket on, but not that thick of a jacket at all because he probably didn't plan on going outside to kill his family and wreak havoc, for that matter, on them. But I mean, hey, you're in the north, you got to prepare. You got to prepare.
So we said we would touch a little bit on the Stephen King's favorite version is the made-for-TV miniseries, which is from 1997. It aired April and May of 1997. You can get it on Amazon, Vudu, and it's pretty much almost not the exact same thing, but it's almost a watered down version of the book. And of course Stephen King is going to like it more because they go word for word almost pretty much on the book. But I think that covers everything that we can get into full on long form here for The Shining. It's just, words can't describe how you get into a movie quite like that. But if you had to go see the movie again, would you see it again?
Yeah, I'd definitely see it again.
As far as one of your favorite Stephen King movies, what do you think about it? As far as, I mean, I know what you think about it, but would it be on your top?
Yeah, I could put it.
Would it be on one of your movies that you have to see every Halloween season?
No, maybe not every Halloween season, but I'd definitely see it at least once, maybe even twice a year for that matter. Because I like to revisit movies that I really, really, really like. I mean, I've seen Harry Potter constantly. I've seen Donnie Darko constantly. I've seen Full Metal Jacket, another Stanley Kubrick movie, a ton of times. So it definitely would be up there with that matter. I would definitely watch it again, time and time, just because the acting is great. Shelley Duvall didn't get a great run to work with, I guess.
Yeah, she really wasn't my favorite part of the movie. I'm not saying she didn't try her hardest or she did a good job, but for me, that wasn't my favorite part of the movie at all. And if you tell yourself she looks familiar, she plays Olive Oil in the live action Popeye featuring Robin Williams. Which
actually would have been kind of interesting to see the characters or the chemicals with her and Robin Williams again in a different movie. That would have been kind of funny and kind of cool to see.
But she didn't do it for me in this movie, and I think for that simple reason, it was not my favorite Stanley Kubrick movie, but it definitely is one of those movies that I do watch once a year, just because it does creep me out, and it is one of those creepy kind of movies. Now, as we are getting in here, this is just episode 2, so don't judge us too harsh. I feel like episode 1, to me, blew this one out of the water. Episode 1 with The Shining was really, really good. So we can't really... We're just 2 episodes. Next week might blow both of these out of the water.
Possible.
And next week we are visiting one of my childhood classics.
Which, truthfully, this movie is a very, very creepy, just insanely creepy movie for that matter.
So next week we will be visiting Killer Clowns from Outer Space, directed by the Cheeto brothers, Steve and Cheeto. It's not one of those movies that you just. It's a cult classic for a wrong reason, but I enjoyed the hell out of it. It is one of those movies that, at its time, was not popular, but it grew with age.
Yep.
I think it's more popular now than it was when it was released in 1988. When was the last time? Have you seen Killer Clowns in full?
Yeah, I've seen it. I actually seen it just. I know this is funny. I actually seen it just last week. For that matter, and it had been a while before that, but we were actually talking about it last week and literally gone home that night and caught it within like 15 minutes from the beginning.
So we are definitely going to rewatch that and get into the Killer Clowns from Outer Space long form. I hope we did The Shining justice today. If we learned anything from the past, we're not going to bash a movie. We're not going to tell you not to go watch it. We're going to tell you to go watch it and tell us what you think about that movie by using hashtag The Shining, hashtag The Cine-Men Movie Podcast, and don't forget to find us on Facebook. Facebook search The Movie Reels 405. Like us, share us, hit that Learn More button, follow us on YouTube, subscribe, and we will definitely...
We will get back to you. I mean, we're going to be interactive. A lot of y'all know us personally, so we're going to be interactive. We're going to try and talk to y'all and get to know some of y'all, get to know some of your thoughts on different movies, different genres. What would you like for us to do next? What would you like? You know what I mean? Because honestly, we have a few different plans even leading up till Christmas time.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, one of my favorites would be, Tim Allen's Santa Claus.
And not only are we going to do some Christmas movies, we're gonna touch up on some Marvel. We're going to touch up on pretty much anything that is relevant, even if it's not relevant. But I still want to get a good following going, and I do want to throw up a poll, just because I want you guys to be interactive, and I want you guys to care about what we're going to cover. So, like we said, we got Killer Clowns coming up next week, and then September 28th, we will be dismantling and dissecting everything Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh man, that one's going to be a very long one right there.
Oh yeah, we are definitely going to do the research and get in long form on Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay, since there are so many different versions of that one, which version will we be covering?
We are going to be doing the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Tobe Hooper, starring the late great Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface. That's the version of Texas Chainsaw Massacre that we're going to be getting to here in 2 weeks. There's definitely a lot of other versions out there. We might touch and do some small segments on those, but definitely doing the 1974's classic of A Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Definitely. And that one will be a very interesting episode, along with the one after that, which will be Halloween, the start of the spooky season, if you will.
The first episode of October will be the original 1978's Halloween. So we're gonna, like we said, we're gonna throw up that poll. About the poll, you will definitely be able to vote and tell us what movie you want to hear us cover starting the second week of October. We will gather up 5 or 6 movies, throw those into the poll, and whichever one wins, we will cover that long form. So, also, if you guys have any other ideas, or if you guys have anything you want us to search, be looking out for that Facebook, Movie Reels 405. I will definitely be throwing up some pictures of The Shining coming up soon, my top 5 Jack Nicholson movies. I'm also going to throw up Ed's pictures of his top 5 Stephen King movies. Before we head out, is there anything you want to cover or go through?
No, I mean, honestly, like I said, I'm just excited to be going into these first podcasts, for that matter, just to reach out to our audience, reach out to friends, family, for that matter, as well, and to see what we can do with this thing, where we can take it, how far we can take this. We're already nearing 100 views on YouTube. We have around 14, maybe 15 subscribers on YouTube. We have about 95, almost maybe 100 on Facebook likes. I know a lot of y'all have been, liking, and some of y'all have been commenting. Some of y'all have even been sharing the page, and we appreciate that so much. We want to say that we're grateful to have the following that we have already, for that matter, and we haven't even released our first video at this time, at least. So yeah, just keep on sharing, liking, commenting, helping get the word out there, kind of. And definitely click that learn more button to go onto the YouTube, subscribe if you like our content, for that matter.
We'll also be doing up the more we get, the more we touch bases with everybody. We're going to do maybe some 30-second to 15-minute Facebook Live videos. We'll go through the library, if you will, of the movies that we go through, all the hard copies that we see and go through. We'll do a little video on that. But don't forget, The Shining is what this episode is all about. How creepy, and how it still stands this test of time. Don't forget, you can check it out at Harkins Theater, October 23rd, 7 p.m., $5 to go see The Shining on the big screen. So, if you ask me, this wraps up week number 2. We are long forming it out. The Shining, week 2. Can't wait for week 3. This is Johnny Real.
And this is Edward Silverscreen signing out.
Lee will see you guys next week.
Have a good one.